Hey everyone, I am John Agroni. I'm the film editor for theyoungfolks.com. I'm also the host of the Cinemaholics podcast, where I review new movies every single week in even more detail. So you can check that out for sure if you so wish. The Matrix Resurrections unbelievably continues the story left behind in the original Matrix trilogy. I honestly can't believe this is happening, that I'm actually talking about this movie. I was expecting the usher at my screening to be like, this was a joke, a practical joke, this movie doesn't exist. But no, it does. And, we thought The Matrix concluded in 2003 with The Matrix Revolutions. I mean, it really did. And fair warning, if you are behind on this trilogy, on these movies, I'm about to get into what happened in the original Matrix trilogy, as it is obviously relevant to me being able to set the stakes for what this movie is, this long-awaited refresh and all of that. I, of course, can preface that The Matrix is a very important film franchise to me as a young critic. I was watching The Matrix back when I was not allowed to watch The Matrix, the original film. I did not see the first film in theaters because I was 9 years old and I kind of had to sneak watch the film, unfortunately. But I was able to see both sequels, which came out the same year. I was able to see those in theaters, and what an experience. And I've always had a soft spot for them. I know they get quite criticized, but I certainly am I'm a fan. I think that the second two films, while not as strong as the first, have so many ideas, so many concepts to play with. They're very satisfying blockbuster films in their own right, especially how quaint they are compared to the films we get today at that same level, which is a big reason why I've been endlessly curious about a Matrix 4, which again, I still can't believe is happening. So this film, it begins with a somewhat faithful repeat of the first scene from the first film, but with a twist. We are apparently watching this through the eyes of a mysterious blue-haired observer named Bugs, played by Jessica Henwick, who has come across what appears to be a coded simulation left intentionally by someone who might be the real Neo, played by Keanu Reeves. Now, a good amount of time has passed since Neo sacrificed his life and apparently died, or did the Jesus thing, as the Wachowskis said in the video game The Path of Neo, great game, in order to defeat Agent Smith and enable a truce between Zion, the last human city in the world, and the machines who created the Matrix as a simulation to pacify and harvest energy from humanity in the aftermath of their great war from who knows how long ago. It's been a long time since I watched the Animatrix, but that's about the gist. Now, much of what has happened since that film is left a bit of a question mark for a good portion of the film, which is why I'm not going to give any of it away. We are introduced to Thomas Anderson, the original alias of Neo from the first film, and of course, he is reprised by Keanu Reeves with his more modern, long hair, beard, John Wick look, living a seemingly normal life in San Francisco, just like me, where The Matrix is a video game he created in the late 90s. And his boss, played by Jonathan Groff, comes to him and insists, hey, you know The Matrix, that video game that was really successful? We need you to create a sequel for it. Even though, artistically, that's a terrible idea. It's a very, very bad idea. Now, Thomas, or Neo, whatever the Matrix held, he regularly meets with a psychiatrist, played by Neil Patrick Harris, who's quite literally feeding him blue pills that will help him push down all of these strange occurrences he continues to see in his everyday life, as if something extraordinarily odd is going on in his ordinary life, but he can't quite place it. There's even a woman in a cafe that he's somehow magnetically drawn to, who also happens to look exactly like Trinity, played by Carrie-Anne Moss. Yes, she's back as well. And also there is an overcoat-clad man played by Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, who eventually comes into Thomas's, or Neo's, or whatever he likes, workplace with guns blazing, assuring him that he has the answers to what exactly is going on. This is all only a morsel of what to expect in The Matrix Resurrections. I promise I haven't given much away at all. And this movie is a deliriously unpredictable comeback story for a franchise that quite honestly does not need a sequel, in my opinion. But even the film says that much directly to the audience and says, I don't need to exist. And it actually finds clever ways to feed that tiresome intellectual property overload mentality into the narrative for a purpose. It's actually about that. While watching this movie, it's clear that Lana Wachowski, who directed this without her sister Lily and shares writing credits with her Sense8 collaborators David Mitchell and Alexander Hammond, It's clear that Lana is repulsed by even the idea of taking these films and churning even more money from them for its own sake. There's ample commentary within The Matrix Resurrections that even, I think, the sleepiest moviegoers will pick up on, like when our Morpheus stand-in, and Lawrence Fishburne does not reprise the role, unfortunately, mentions how we're all trapped inside these strange repeating loops, clearly pointing to the loops of blockbuster franchises, always going back to other things that they know worked before and obeying the algorithm of nostalgia, essentially. Warner Brothers reportedly approached the Wachowski sisters for years, relentlessly proposing they make another Matrix film. So there's a reason only one of them returned to do so, but the good news is that Resurrections is apparently a film she did make on her own terms, as this is far too individualistic and weird for a legacy sequel, at least as we know them, and at least in the most important ways. Now, admittedly, there are too many times when the film does the Force Awakens thing, or Space Jam, A New Legacy thing, if we want to be even more recent, where it repeatedly reminds you of the older films for no reason other than to elicit a basic knuckle-brained reaction and look, I recognize the thing. And the film does this odd thing where it shows clips from the original trilogy a lot through the film, usually to add context, like a character briefly glimpsing a repressed memory. And while it's a nice idea for the purpose of the script and the story, it's actually a bit sad to see such crisp, tantalizing cinematography for only a moment before we cut back to the overly clean pop style of this new one. Now, to be fair, the packaged studio sheen of Resurrections is absolutely intentional. Part of the running gag is that Lana Wachowski wants to poke and prod at the studio system and the most lampoon-worthy perils of this century's tech-addicted decade. And yes, the visual effects are often astounding, with much of the fight choreography and the overall stunt work matching nicely with the sunnier, brighter golden hour look of this film. The sun is actually out in this version of The Matrix, and yes, it's off-putting at first. It really is. It sort of needs to be, though. If this were simply another Matrix installment with the same cinematic language down to the night filters and the green coating, it would be a culprit of the same criticisms the Wachowski, or I was going to say the Wachowskis, but just Lana Wachowski wants to lay at the feet of modern tentpoles. It would be guilty of the same sins it is preaching against. Now, is this film deja vu? Perhaps so, and perhaps too often. The climax is especially flat in terms of giving these characters an action rumble anywhere close to as satisfying, memorable as Revolutions or the 1999 original, to be sure. So it's not totally deja vu in that sense, which would be a bad thing. And there are even some characters who pop in for extended cameos, and while it's nice to see most of them again on a pure trivia level, a lot of them, they only subtract, not really add from the urgency and the intrigue of what's happening with Neo and these new interesting characters we do get to meet and spend some time with. I wish we had spent more time with them instead of these sort of repeat characters. As for Reeves and Moss, there is no question that these two were apparently thrilled to reprise their roles once again. It's easy to argue that their stories sort of ended on an abrupt note in the last installment, and the way they get worked back into the plot is almost kind of charming in how hokey and self-aware it is. If any film franchise has room to be this meta, it is certainly The Matrix. The Matrix Resurrections, it clocks well over 2 hours, but by the end, it's easy to think that this is only the beginning of something. I hesitate to even call it The Matrix Rebooted, even though that's such an easy layup. But it's honestly because that title, it almost makes this movie sound like a cheap, easy, unplug from the wall, plug it back in, when this is really a softer, more painstaking examination of the prior films, what made them tick, why they were so interesting, and then exploring the possibility of what a Matrix movie could look like in the future, in 2021 and beyond. And to put it as simply as possible, The Matrix Resurrections is one of the few sci-fi films in 2021 I've seen this year that has this much personality, a willingness to goof around, crack jokes, and inspire hours of philosophical discussions that will be far more deep and profound than what you started with while viewing the actual film. Lana Wachowski was given an impossible task, I think, to make The Matrix relevant and timeless again, and to push it past the misconceptions its pill mentality has unfortunately been twisted into over the last 20 years and more recently. Rather than go back to basics, Wachowski and her team apply the same creative principles of the first film to Resurrections, albeit with some unfortunate fan service modifications that I think some people will find pretty regrettable. But if you're willing to to plug into this virtual wonderland for something bold and sparkling and even counterintuitive at times, then The Matrix Resurrections might be your new favorite shock to the system. The Matrix Resurrections, when is it coming out? It's going to be opening in theaters everywhere starting December 22nd, so literally tomorrow. Embargo is pretty late on this. It's also going to be available to stream on HBO Max for 30 days, and it's definitely not a movie that I think is a rush to the theater no matter what kind of movie, considering especially what's going on with health in the world right now. But if you do manage to see it on the theater, I think that you are going to be pleased with the presentation, assuming your theater is good at that sort of thing. All right, that's it for me. Have an amazing holiday. I know you're so sad. I was going to talk about Sing 2. I might still. It's just such a busy time. I'm not sure if I will get to Sing 2, to be honest. I didn't get to Hating Game, like I said I might. And there are plenty of other films that I do need to screen before the year ends. There's so many other things that I want to watch before the year ends so I can finalize my favorite films of the year list. If you can't wait, though, and you want to know, well, what are some of the best films of the year? I want to know. Well, theyoungfolks.com, we just put on our best films of 2021. That's right, our 13 best films. Not chosen by just me. I barely factored my list into it at all. It really is our amazing contributors at The Young Folks who worked on this list, did their rankings, sent them in. I just organized it up so you can read their blurbs on all the top films. Really great films on that list. In fact, I don't know, because I didn't start doing these regular reviews until later in the year, I don't even know if any of the films I've talked about are on that list. So pretty interesting stuff. So definitely check that out when you get a chance. It is on theyoungfolks.com in the film section. I might link to it if I remember, but you know how it is. That's it for me for sure on this one. Have an amazing rest of your holiday week, depending on what you celebrate, and I will see you all on the next one.